We haven't had a new EVF from Zacuto since 2016 when they introed the Gratical Eye, but today we are looking at Zacuto's latest, the Kameleon EVF. Zacuto have worked with JTZ to create the Kameleon. If you take a look at the X01K from JTZ, you can see it is almost identical to the Kameleon physically, but Zacuto have added their own few little twists, such as redesigned software, optical improvements, and Zacuto's anti-fog system. Taking a look at the EVF physically, you have both an SDI and HDMI input, so you'll be able to use it with pretty much any camera you want. The HDMI port can also support 4K up to 30p. Next to the SDI, you also have a 4-pin LEMO port that can take between 7 to 12 volts. In the default position, the SDI and power ports are located at the bottom of the viewfinder, but you can flip the viewfinder by removing the eye cup and flipping the display. This is made possible by the two rosettes on either side of the EVF. This gives you flexibility depending on how you want to run your cables. The eye cup features Zacuto's anti-closing eye cup flap. This is great for protecting the optic and can also prevent screen burn from the sun. You also have adapter built in and the ability to add +1 to +4 drop-in diopters for extreme correction. Zacuto have also produced two new power and video cables, one HDMI and one SDI version. One new feature on these cables is the on-off switch on the D-tap connector. The lack of a power on-off switch was one big complaint users had about the Gratical Eye, so this seems like a bit of a compromise that saves Zacuto from implementing one on the Kameleon itself. You also have a USB-C port. This can be used for supplying power, importing 3D LUTs, as well as updating firmware. Overall, the build quality is stellar, the EVF feels extremely solid and the buttons feel nice. The Kameleon is the only Zacuto viewfinder that has 3D LUTs support at the moment. Before this, only 1D LUTs could be used. As a standard, the Kameleon has 4 log LUTs included, which are S-Log2, S-Log3, C-Log, and V-Log. You can't edit or create LUTs internally, you can only import them. The Kameleon is priced at around £1,500, so it's aimed very close to this price of the Gratical Eye. For people wondering what the differences are between the Gratical Eye and the Kameleon, here's a quick chart showing you the differences. One of the biggest attractions of the Kameleon EVF, the 1080p micro OLED screen, which is a step up 720p screens used in the previous Gratical line. One thing I did notice was that the Gratical Eye unit we tested, side by side with the Kameleon, looked a bit sharper. One thing I prefer on the Kameleon is the better viewing angles. The Gratical Eye has some colour shifts as you move your eye around the eyepiece, whereas the Kameleon does not. The way the Kameleon and the Gratical handle camera information is also slightly different. The Kameleon overlays the camera data over the image, which in turn means they have to use a lower brightness of 100 to 125 luminance, whereas the Gratical puts your camera data below the image and has a brighter image of between 150 and 250 luminance. I personally prefer having the data underneath the image rather than it overlaid. Another big difference between the two EVS is their focus assist tools. The Kameleon has red line focus assist or peaking, whereas the Eye has multi-level sharpening focus assist. Personally, I prefer the multi-level sharpening, but I also really like the 4x zoom on the Kameleon compared to the 1x on the Gratical Eye. So overall, I think the Kameleon is a really good addition to the Zacuto EVF family. It doesn't necessarily replace any of the current viewfinders, as they all have different pros and cons, but let us know what you think of the Kameleon EVF in the comments below and make sure you're subscribed.